We can just say, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck and a woodchuck could chuck wood and then nobody will care.
I haven't had a chance to talk to you, but we talked, last week, so I was over here. And she reminded me, because she saw all the stuff, she said, go ahead and submit it all.
Yeah.
But not to fill it out.
Yeah,
it seems to be-
Yeah.
2024 BAR large meeting at the public meeting room at 2 George Street. I'm John Robinson. I'm the chairman for this evening's proceedings. The other board members present with me are Jay White, Luda Sobchak, James Metters, and Eddie Fava, who is sitting in ad hoc this evening. Recusing on the 159 Calhoun Street College Lodge project will be Jay White and James Metters. We'll have a bare majority to get through that application, however. City staff present this evening are BD Wortham Galvin, our city architect, Lawrence Courtney, and Travis Galley. For those of you who are frequent flyers, you'll know all this, but we do this for the benefit of the public. All applicants who will be presenting tonight have been required to submit all documents in advance of the deadlines required. The staff will control the slideshow presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the appropriate deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. The applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the slide they would like the board to see. When an applicant speaks, person affiliated with the application should give their name and their affiliation to the project. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the City of Charleston Public Meeting Channel on YouTube. Your presence here is your consent to have been recorded. This is a reminder that for each individual application, the order of presentation will be as follows. There will first be an introduction and overview by the city staff for the benefit of the board and the public. This is followed by the applicant's 10-minute presentation unless extended by the chair. That can include any questions of the applicant directly from the board or staff. Again, any and all presenters should clearly state their name for the record and their affiliation with the project. This is followed by the public comment period. All applications here are part of a public meeting. Written public comments have been disseminated to the board, and we actually have them with us up here tonight. They will not be read into the record unless it's requested by a member and deemed necessary by the chair. Any member of the public who wishes to speak here in person this evening may do so by approaching the podium. You are politely reminded that there's a 2-minute time limit on public remarks. Any person speaking should state their name and address for the record. This is followed by city staff comments and recommendations on the application. This is in turn followed by the applicant's response or clarification, either to public comments and or city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant is not required to use this time. There is a 5-minute time limit on the response. This is ultimately followed by board discussion and a vote on each individual application. At this point, the applicant's presentation is over. Public comment is also closed. The applicant can clarify inaccurate information by being recognized by the chair by simply raising their hand. Board members will be polled by the chairperson for comments and their vote on any given motion. I will reread the motion verbatim, or to the best of my ability verbatim. If I've made an obvious error, I know my board members will correct me so that we restate the motion accurately. Once a motion is in proper order and seconded, each member is reminded to vote yay in favor or nay not in favor or indicate that they're abstaining. Results of tonight's meeting will be posted at the city's website, which is charleston-sc.gov/BAR. As we proceed into the meeting, we need to approve.
Excuse me, and item B193 Society.
Thank you, Lawrence. For the record, and it's stamped right here in giant red writing in front of me, but I failed to read it. The application for 93 Society Street, or at least the mock-up panel affiliated with that project, has been withdrawn at the request of the applicant. Moving to the agenda, item A1, approval of our April 10, 2024 meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve as published? I have a motion. Is there a second? A second from Mr. White. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Minutes pass. Moving to item B2, since B1 has been withdrawn, which is the College Lodge project.
Item B2. Back up, please. Is 159 Calhoun Street. It is not rated. It dates from 1963 to 64 in the old and historic district. The applicant is requesting approval for complete demolition of the 1964 Downtowner Inn, now known as College Lodge. Here's an overview of the site. And then what follows will be some existing site photos as well as context. All right, and we're ready for the applicant's presentation.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Appreciate y'all having us again tonight. And two things at the onset. Go ahead and request a little bit of time. Got
Sure.
several folks.
I would like to hand it out in 5-minute increments. Would you like to request a full additional 10 minutes?
That would be terrific. Yeah, full additional 10 would be good. We have a few folks that we brought tonight that are in response to some of the conversation that we had in January with this board. And I would also like to, in hopes that we're not retreading all the time that we spent in January, just make sure that all of that material is incorporated into the presentation and comments for today. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and we're going to spend much of the day this evening, or much of the time this evening, hearing from the experts that I think that's what we took from the deferral last time around. But I do want to give a little bit of an overview of what we're going to try and present for the board today. And first of all, thank you to the two board members that came out yesterday for a site visit. I think it's helpful to see the facility. I know everybody's busy, and so to be able to take time out of your day to do that is certainly greatly appreciated by the College of Charleston. So when we were here in January, our petition to the board was simply to have the board reaffirm a prior decision of this very same board on this very same building that it made in 2003, in which it approved the demolition of this building. For any number of factors, the college was unable to move forward with that plan then, but now we're back to ask for that. At the January meeting, we walked this board through what is stated in the city zoning when it comes to applications or requests for demolition, and the context that the things that the board is allowed to consider when an application like this is before them. That is the structure, historic and architectural. Does the aesthetic features of the structure, how do they fit in with the character and the surrounding neighborhood and the historical and cultural importance of the structure? And I feel like we demonstrated that when viewed in the context of the zoning ordinance, that this particular facility in its condition, and given the level of remedial work that is required and necessary, it does not withstand the test necessary for preservation. And I would even go a step further that the building as it stands today is largely as it stood in 2003 when the Board of Architectural Review agreed that it did not withstand the test of preservation. And the work that is required now to be able to create a safe environment for occupants certainly would go even further in questioning whether or not preservation is appropriate. At the January meeting, there was a lot of debate about the level of necessity or the requirement of the work that was done. We were asked to come back with some subject matter experts, primarily on the mechanical and structural side, and you will hear from those folks here in just a few minutes. But I venture to say that much of the confusion that existed in January, I think still exists today. And that confusion is around whether or not the work that we are proposing is in fact required or is it voluntary. I'm here to be very clear that in the views of the president and the board of trustees, it is not optional. The work that we are proposing is not voluntary. It is necessary and must be completed for the building to be occupied once again. You'll hear from our mechanical engineer about the necessary floor penetrations for the mechanical work that needs to come. And then he will also then hear from the structural engineer about what needs to be done to be able to create a safe environment. And we feel like that both of them will be able to demonstrate to you that this work is in fact not voluntary, a position that is supported by our experts and by the Office of State Engineer, Phil Gerald, who said in his letter that for the College Lodge, the Office of State Engineer would recommend that future rehabilitations or alterations include the voluntary seismic upgrades listed in the ADC report. To me, the language of voluntary seismic upgrades is clarified by that it is required that this work be done. So we very much do not believe that the renovations and the remediations are in fact voluntary. We believe that they are required to create a safe environment. So now I'll call on Christy Schultz, who will walk the board a little bit through a timeline of how we arrived at this place. We've all read about it. She's actually lived through much of that as she's been with this project from the start. And then our expert from DWG will talk about the mechanical upgrades necessary and required to the building. And then our expert from ADC We'll talk about what needs to be done to address the seismic deficiencies of the building, followed by Jung. We'll talk a little bit about how all of this then kind of works within what is necessary to the building and how that affects the architectural merit of the building. So Christy, I'll let you go next.
Thank you, Paul. I am Christy Schultz. I am the Director of Architecture and Engineering for College of Charleston. And I want to quickly go through the timeline of how we got from our decision back in 2020, after we conducted the Satil and Satil study of preserving the building and doing a adaptive reuse, to our decision today of demolition. You might want to, yes, the slides, a couple. Yeah, that would be good. Okay. So I'm going to start with the Satil and Satil study. The primary goal of the Satil study was to actually gauge the stakeholders. College of Charleston is very well aware and recognizes that College Lodge is a unique building. It's a mid-century modern building with unique characteristics. And we also recognize that it is very much beloved by several people. So the study, it was a limited feasibility with some zoning information and some conditioning, some existing conditions information, but the main emphasis was to speak with the stakeholders and gauge what they wanted. So we conducted studies with who we felt were the stakeholders, the students, of course, alumni, the preservation groups, both Historic Charleston and the Preservation Society, the City of Charleston staff, the city architect, the zoning administrator at the time. I want to say that we also engaged or tried to engage the neighborhood groups. And I think that might have been it. And we went through this whole process. It took several months, and we did come to the conclusion that we would keep this building and continue to do some upgrades. And everybody, it was a good conclusion. So what happened next was, after we came to that decision, we started planning for our phase 1 renovation, which was going to be a summer renovation. And that was to basically implement HVAC, which was giving us our biggest problems, and do upgrades to the fire alarm system. So summer of 21, we did expend $3.2 million in doing that, what we set out to do. You could see the mechanical equipment on the roof. And unfortunately, the other thing that happened in the summer of 2021 was the collapse of the Champlain Towers in Florida. When this happened, it really kind of woke us up. And we had ABC do a seismic study. The report came back in the winter of 2021, and it recommended that we do these seismic upgrades. At the time, we continued to, they were voluntary upgrades. We committed to moving forward with doing these upgrades because, as Paul explained, they were non-negotiable. And we were planning the next phase for the summer of 2022. So in summer 2022, we were going to do abatement and the installation of the interior part of the HVAC system. And that involved coring through the floor slabs. And in doing this, we realized just how complicated it really was to get to renovate an existing concrete building. The rebar was not, it was different on every floor. As a result, the chases for the HVAC for the vents, or not vents, I'm sorry, the ducts just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So as we kept going through this, studying the seismic study, as a result, the room started to shrink further and further. And we basically came to the conclusion that because of the difficulty in renovating a concrete structure, the impact on the size of the room that was looking like we probably could only have one occupant in the rooms, which we at the time had two. So it cut our occupancy in half. And also the cost estimate of the seismic upgrades, which we knew at the time, we agreed to them, was probably going to be about $10 million of added costs. So all of these things gave us a lot of pause. We went back to the drawing board, so to speak, and at this point, we did abandon, the strategy that we were on, and we decided to pursue demolition. In May 2023, College Lodge was taken out of service. And I do want to say that at the moment, CFC desperately needs dorm rooms. However, we are not comfortable putting students back in there. Anyway, I'm going to pass this on to Simmons. Our architect.
Good evening. I'm going to take just a minute to introduce the team here. I'm Simmons Young here on behalf of the College of Charleston. For the past 18 years, I've been working primarily on historic buildings, beginning in San Francisco and then here in Charleston for the last 15 years. My firm focuses on preservation work, adaptive reuse, rehabilitation, primarily here on the peninsula. For the past 9 months, I've studied this site, and for the past 5 months, I've been involved in vetting the college's study and real-world implementation of work on the building. In order to thoroughly understand the college's work, I treated this project as if I were the architect hired to preserve this building and reuse it. That involved the following. Analyzing the client steps towards repair and rehabilitation between 2002 and 2020, including the 2003 VAR demolition approval. Analyzing the work done after 2020 that was completed in an effort to implement the Satile and Satile plan, conceptual plan. Studying the history of the building and its features, along with other buildings from this era, including the old Days Inn. Seeking counsel from the authority having jurisdiction over the building, the Office of the State Engineer. Coordinating with the structural engineering team to find a way to preserve the existing structure, trying to do that. Coordinating with the mechanical engineer who's working with the structural. Working with the building owner and the OSE's requirement for seismic upgrades, as just expressed, put the students back in the building. And then working with the engineer's requirement for code-triggered seismic upgrades, which you'll see in a moment. That result from having to rebuild some of the slabs. This would not be a preservation project because 95% of the structures visible from the right-of-way will be demolished and rebuilt. So it would become a reconstruction project, given the issues at hand. And in the end, it will be a failed architecture project. It leaves the owner with rooms that do not meet college standards for student housing, along with a heavy reduction in the number of beds available. And it worked as it was originally designed for short-term accommodations, 7'10" ceilings, small rooms, built by developers in a cost-effective manner, but falls short on its given task as a dormitory. So with that, I'd like to introduce Will Billard, our MEP engineer with DWG Engineering, who's worked extensively on the building even prior to us joining the project. Slide 5 is where we're headed next. You can do slide.
Five, I think. There we go, that's it. I'm Will Billard with DWG, mechanical engineer. I've been with DWG for about 13 years. I've been working with the college that entire time. I've worked on various projects and studies at College Lodge since at least 2018. So I'm very familiar with the building. I'll be honest, this is a very difficult building from a mechanical engineering standpoint. As Simmons mentioned, the ceiling heights are extremely low. There is no ceiling cavity. It is floor to slab, and there's no way to hide all the pipes and utilities that we need to hide. The other aspect is the front wall of the suites are all glass. So there's no way to put without changing the exterior appearance, there's no way to put any sort of mechanical equipment on that exterior wall. Dealing with a 60 to 70-year-old envelope, there are huge concerns about vapor intrusion and humidity infiltration. So one of our primary objectives is to control the pressurization. So, and we're doing that by the use of a dedicated outdoor air unit. One of the other factors that makes this building more difficult is that all the rooms have exterior door access. I know that was, common in the older days, but you see that less and less now. And a lot of that is because of pressurization. As every time the door opens, you're losing air. And so when you have that many exterior doors, it's hard to control. The dedicated outdoor air unit, DOAU for short, ensures that you've got more positive pressurization than your exhaust that's coming out of the building. So it ensures that you're pressurizing, pushing that air outward to keep the humidity from coming in. So, when you combine the fact that we need this ventilation unit and the low ceiling heights, what we found is basically above the first floor, all of our ducting had to be done, all of our horizontal ducting either had to be done above the first floor ceiling or on the roof. Because our units were up on the roof and the limited floor space down on the site, we ducted everything out horizontally on the roof and then penetrated vertically through. Working with ADC, that's where we started, getting into the problems of the penetrations through the floor and what Christy mentioned about the rebar being misaligned just because that's the way the construction standards are, and the chase spaces just ate into the suites. So, we did look at other mechanical options, but the truth of the matter is the college has invested heavily in high efficiency chill water systems throughout. They've got a couple of different systems on campus. One in the Simmons plant that just opened recently is nearby. So it would be a waste in our opinion to not utilize that chill water. So that was one factor. Also, chill water has a high amount of dehumidification ability. So if we were looking at DX versus chill water is definitely the way to go as far as dehumidification is concerned. Trying to think what else I want to touch on. PTAX, we did look at that, thank you, Christy. One of the factors is with all of those glass walls. When we originally did the work to put the DOAU on there, on the building, we weren't changing the exterior envelope. We weren't changing that front wall. So putting PTAX wasn't really an option. Even now, if, we were gonna do that, we'd have to modify the front wall. Now with PTAX, some of them, during the summer, all of them are gonna be running, but there are times of the year that you're only gonna have a portion running. It could be 25% of them. So if all of our outside air is running through those PTAX, there's no way to control that ventilation. Your exhaust is gonna be going a lot of times, but your outdoor intake is gonna be limited through PTAX. And also PTAX are DX. And like I mentioned, they have less dehumidification ability than chill. They have had mold problems in the past, so that's why I keep touching on dehumidification. Keeping that under control has always been a priority in this building, and dorms in general. That's a huge thing that we're trying to look out for. Chris, yep. Thank y'all.
Can you advance to the next slide, please? Hello, I'm Chris Goger with ADC Engineering. I've been with ADC for almost 28 years now. I'm a partner in the structural department. A lot of you are familiar with Mark. I kind of sit at the right hand of Mark. We've been working with the college for 25 years now. Myself, I have probably 2 or 3 projects that have gone on with College Lodge. We have other project managers that have had a lot of experience with College Lodge as well. So when I speak, I'm not, and my opinions are not just my opinions, they're ADC's opinions, they're the opinions of Mark, they're the opinions of Jesse, they're the opinions of all of our project managers. We were asked by the college to review our 2021 report and update it and to take into account the newly added duct penetration. So we did that. We found that by adding the penetrations, it didn't quite trigger code required seismic upgrades. But we did find that some of the balconies had issues. And so we ran some calcs, we found that some of the balconies were failing, which led to two corrective actions, one being a retrofit and the second being a reconstruction. The retrofit is a gravity retrofit. It does not do anything seismically. The reconstruction does trigger seismic. It's ADC's opinion that for this particular building, seismic upgrades are a necessity for the safety of the public, for the safety of the occupants. We've always mandated that seismic upgrades should be done. The college is 100% behind us on that. The OSE, the Office of State Engineers, is 100% behind us on that as well. Can we go to the next slide? So this is the USGS seismic hazards map. You can see Charleston is in a high seismic region. A couple of the main issues that are wrong with this building are lack of load path. There are shear walls on the upper levels, but as you come down to the second floor, the first floor, you have a lot of columns. And so you have no load path really for the seismic lateral load to get out of the building and down to the foundation, down to the ground. You can see, and what that does is that creates a thing we don't like called weak story or soft story. You can see here in the diagram down below, kind of an example of what happens in weak story, soft story situations. The building kind of pancakes on itself. That's an example of a structure in Taiwan that recently went over. Can you go to the next slide? So in the retrofit approach, again, we were looking at adding columns of steel beams under the balconies. They require replacing the exterior doors and windows. And again, as a part of this is including seismic upgrades that are, we feel, a necessity for any occupant in here for their safety. So you would have new shear walls being added, new foundations being added to support the shear walls, micropiles to support all that, because not only do we high seismic, but we have bad soils as well. So we have to have pile foundations. So getting all that done is quite the undertaking. When you're adding new shear walls in the building, you are cutting down on the space because we're going to have to shotcrete and make some of the walls larger. We're going to encroach on already tight spaces for the occupant. The main spine of the building only has one shear wall going down the center of it. So, and on either side of that wall are the bathrooms. So all of that has to all get reconfigured because we're going to be adding shear wall to that space. So all the plumbing, all of that needs to be reconfigured as well. In addition, we'll be cutting up, there's a expansion joint that connects the main vertical section to the segment that sticks out on the left, on my left-hand side there. We would be tying those two, essentially the building acts as two buildings. We would be tying those two buildings together to act as one as a part of the retrofit. Go to the next slide. Here, reconstruction was the second option, and this is where we would remove some of the balcony slabs. By doing this option, it's a lot more expensive, but it maintains some of the original look and characters. But this option also triggers code mandated seismic upfits, which again would include new shear walls, new foundations, new piles, new cords and collectors. That's rebar being cut into the slabs, tying the two buildings together. Everything that's needed. Again, we feel even though under the retrofit, it does say voluntary, but public safety is not voluntary in our eyes. It should be done. The college agrees with that. So that's our position.
All right, yeah, thanks, Chris. If y'all have any questions, we can do that at the end, but if you have any now.
I'll jump on one so that don't forget it later. Simmons, I believe you said that something like 95% of the structure or the exterior of the structure would have to be reconstructed or reconstituted.
Yes,
Explain that to me.
sure. I'm gonna skip, does this thing work?
You can see it if it does.
You did your own risk.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go, yeah, let's see, so, this is a slide that's gonna talk about that, so now I gotta get my, what slide number are we?
That's 17.
17, okay, thank you. So everything in red there is what gets demolished, so you're looking at railings, point over here, that's right. Railings, balconies, in order to keep that 4-inch character defining edge, you have to demolish it and rebuild it. The glazed walls, those don't have, single glaze, and they're also just not gonna work because you have to demo, back 4 feet into the rooms in order to make these slabs work, the way that they poke out. Let's see, we've got brick veneer, you'd have to pull that off because the ties have rusted over time. You've got storefront that would have to come out, all along here. There is an option for the brick veneer, you could pin it back, but at this point, if you're gonna do all this work, you need to waterproof the building, and poking 1,000 holes in it is a bad idea. Especially with concrete that's got rusting rebar behind it. Metal panels and mullions, those all come down to inspect the concrete that's behind here. These beams stay, that's the 5%. And then the breeze blocks are unreinforced stack bond. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong there, but they would fall straight out in the street in a seismic event, so they would need to be pulled down and reinforced. The roof gets replaced. All the mechanical that was installed years ago comes off and goes back on. So there's a better view. That's all the new stuff. This is a 3D view. So the preservation, what would be preserved is everything that's 12 feet inside of the building. So everything is visible from the public right away gets removed here. This is what it looks like when you start to rebuild it to look like the building that's there now. If you were to reconstruct it, these are all the things that are gone. So you're pulled back to that core. And you can see these vertical walls are still here. They're going to be doubled up in several cases. And again, Chris, stop me if I'm wrong. But these slabs are pushed back into the rooms, which is why all the facades are gone, all the glass storefront walls are gone. These get jacketed. These would get jacketed if this were to go forward. And they come out onto the sidewalk by 3 inches of the public right away. And that's the other view. So again, same thing, balconies, guardrails, handrails, glazing, doors, framing for installation of the balconies, stack bond CMU, replace all the brick veneer due to lack of attachment, remove the downtowner blocks, remove the stairs associated and the associated railings. They're not wide enough. They have these cool stairs in the back, but they've got structural problems and they're also not wide enough for egress. Remove the existing membrane roof and remove and replace the roof mount and mechanical equipment, which is brand new. So that's the demo. And I won't do that again, but I will just go quickly through these slides. These are the ones that were presented at the last meeting. And I think it covers the shear walls that that Chris was talking about. So these get inserted into each room, which is internal, but they come down to the ground floor. So any idea of opening up the ground floor, actually the opposite has to occur. The shear walls have to split up the ground floor more. These are the mechanical. This is on the roof. The college spent $3.4 million putting this equipment up here when they were when they were trying to implement the conceptual plan. Phase 2 of that was poking holes in the slabs. That's these holes that we're going to go through there. Those proved very problematic because of the alignment of the rebar. When you're putting a slab, board in place slab in the you know, you're pouring it 60 feet in the air with a couple of, with skilled iron workers laying out the rebar, it's not gonna be very precise. This was proposed in 2002, when Rosenblum Co. was looking at upfitting it, stairs and a elevator that meets the requirements for a stretcher, since it's 6 stories and students live in it. That's the compiled thing. This is where we left kind of at the last meeting, and then the question came up, well, what does that mean on the outside? And this is where ADC really came into the picture for us. Again, we said, all right, balconies are character defining features. What does it take to keep those? That's what we talked about there. There was the option. Now, this does not achieve a seismic, this doesn't meet a seismic requirement, which our client at the college has said, if we're gonna put, you know, students living in this building, it's gonna be seismically upgraded. Which makes a lot of sense. So this changes the balconies to 12 inches instead of 4 inches. This green beam number 3 there. And again, that's the jacketed columns, but the option is not really, you know, it wouldn't be accepted by the college or the state office of the state engineer. So that's when you get to this one. If you're trying to preserve the building, it's not possible. It's a reconstruction in order to get that same slab width, again, which we feel are character defining features of this building. You got to demolish and rebuild it. That's the green stuff is the new stuff. So, you know, here, and here. So our contention is that this is, so one other view, or during demolition. That if you do all this, you've got a failed preservation project, you've got a reconstruction. And the building certainly warrants a seismic upgrade. So this is what, according to our engineers at ADC, this is what needs to occur to get there. You've also got a failed architecture project, you're not meeting the needs of the clients, and also at the welfare and sort of a long-term occupancy of this building, a 9-month occupancy of this building, you know, in a 145 square foot room with 2 students is very different than a 3-day stay in Charleston on a motor tour of the city. Change of use is not, well, it puts us in the same place. It triggers a seismic upgrade. And Chris, sort of stop me if I.
And you're correct.
Okay. So this is the plan view of the things that will be removed. This is the area that's visible from the public right away. So once you get down to it, again, you've got a core of slabs and not great slabs that you're working with. So there are things in that addendum which we're welcome to go to. They have the Office of the State Engineer's letter. There's a letter from the fire marshal for the college. There is the report from the mechanical engineer and the full-size drawings from the structural engineer as well. So I think that is anything other things that we should say that I can think of.
Good, I think so much of it is just so much of the architectural fabric that we're trying to preserve is lost in
Christy, if you're, you have to speak into the microphone so the people.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so no, we would love for you to say something, but it's just gotta be into the microphone.
Well, I don't wanna
Yeah.
drag this out too long, but I would just say that, you know, as an architect and from the college's standpoint, so much of this architectural fabric, the uniqueness of College Lodge, the elementalness of it that we're trying to preserve. But in doing so, we found that we end up losing it. We end up having to rebuild it. And even by today's codes, it would be hard to replicate, even if we do rebuild it. So that really is how we got to this conclusion of demolition. It's just, wait a minute, what are we doing here? So with that.
Good. Very good. Members of the public wishing to speak on this agenda item? Nope. Mr. Ravenel? Thank you. Y'all students? Do you live in College?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Daniel Ravenel. I live at 68 Broad Street. I've been a trustee of the college. I've been involved in a lot of decisions over the years, and I am a preservationist. I've observed 12 buildings in the Charleston region. So I think in a way, while I'm a College of Charleston graduate, and I probably would be considered prejudiced in their favor, I think the truth is the truth. This building has been dangerous since I was a student. Because I'm always afraid that somebody's going to fall off the building. Would this building be approved today by the VAR if it was being built from that site? With all the inadequacies attached? I doubt it. I think the building needs to be demolished. It's unfortunate. But it is an important impediment. When I was a student, it was considered a bit of a illicit activity center. And I suspect it still is.
Thank you, Mr. Ravenel. Other members of the public wishing to be heard? Ms. Mahar?
Mary Mahard with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society remains staunchly opposed to the demolition of College Lodge. We believe there are opportunities to rehabilitate this valuable mid-century building to meet campus goals and incorporate desired safety upgrades. This is a consequential decision, so we appreciate the team meeting with us to discuss this request. Significance is the core issue here because that's the board's charge. The SHPO's letter, which serves as the official determination of eligibility for the National Register, can be an important tool in guiding your review of the proposed demolition under the criteria in section 54-240B. It confirms the building is architecturally unique, it retains its historic integrity, and strongly conveys information about the time period in which it was built. We encourage you to be mindful of your authority and focus your discussion on the building's significance. We also want to highlight the 2020 study commissioned by the college that shows there are cost-effective alternatives to meet the college's program goals while retaining the historic character of the building. We support the need to create safe, livable conditions for students. However, the college's own engineering report says that seismic upgrades are voluntary, and there are opportunities for retrofitting the building without significant interventions. A fact obscured by showing just one heavy-handed plan for rehabilitation. We also question the detrimental impacts this approach would have if applied to other older dormitories and historic house residences under the college's care. Charleston is not the only community facing these challenges. In California, where modernist buildings are much more abundant, seismic upgrades are routine and can inform solutions for College Lodge. We recognize that a great deal of the material would need to be replaced, but the building's form is clearly important as a strong representation of mid-century architecture rarely seen in Charleston. And this board has a strong track record of saving buildings due to their significant form. To conclude, seismic upgrades are not an acceptable justification for demolition, and there is strong evidence supporting preservation of this notable building. The college could explore partnering with a developer to obtain historic tax credits for the project, or if the building no longer fits within the college's program, it could seek a preservation-minded buyer. Therefore, we ask the board to uphold Charleston's strong tradition of preserving history and adapting buildings for continued use and deny the request for demolition of College Lodge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahard. Other members of the public wishing to speak on this agenda item?
Hello, I am Brittany Lavelle-Tula. I'm an architectural historian here in the city. I also serve as an adjunct professor in the College of Charleston's Historic Preservation Program. So I'm sure it's no surprise that I am against the demolition of College Lodge, and here's a few reasons why. I do specialize in National Register nominations, and I work closely with the South Carolina State Historic Preservation Office in helping prove the eligibility of historic properties for the National Register. And I know there was some confusion about the SHPO's letter of eligibility and how much weight it actually has. Just to clarify, I know Aaron mentioned that on January 3rd, the South Carolina SHPO did confirm that the property is eligible for listing on the National Register for its associations with the growth of tourism in post-war Charleston, as well as a rare surviving example of a mid-century motel downtown and an unusual example of modernism in downtown Charleston. It is a product of its time with significant character-defining details intact. This kind of letter of eligibility evaluation are not given lightly. Yes, the National Park Service has the final say as to what is ultimately listed on the National Register. The State Historic Preservation Office is the governing body at the state level for the National Register and must approve of every single nomination before it goes before the Park Service for final listing. The National Park Service does require the state's endorsement, and therefore, if the state deems something eligible for the National Register, it is likely to be listed if formally nominated. So it is not common to get a letter of eligibility. It is actually very hard. The letter of eligibility is a green light, and should you choose to nominate the structure, the building should get listed. And it's kind of SHPO's informal stamp that this building is worthy of preservation, and therefore its demise would be a significant loss to the city's historic fabric. It's worth it. And College Lodge is an exceptional architectural resource in downtown Charleston and a culturally significant structure for all the reasons that SHPO outlined in their letter, which I know has been in the packet, especially in this area of Calhoun, which has experienced vast demolitions by CFC since the 1970s. On Calhoun Street between King and Pitt alone, CFC has demolished over 20 buildings, ranging from historic single houses to 1920s high schools, and of course another mid-century motel, the Orban Motor Court, slowly erasing diverse buildings from this section of the city. And we know that theories and opinions on preservations has definitely evolved and changed over time. But today, as stewards at the historic campus, and in light of the growing awareness of the vast positive impacts of preservation, there is absolutely no excuse. And there are many case studies, and this is what I'll conclude, where 1960s motels, much worse off than this, have been successfully restored. And of course, this is true for the Starlight Motor Inn in North Charleston, which I know on a personal level, I was the architectural historian that oversaw that restoration and rehab. The building had no roof. It had more mold than you can possibly believe. It was condemned, and it was successfully restored into the landmark that it is today. So it is possible with creativity and patience. College Lodge, the demolition may seem like a quick fix, but it would actually be a devastating cultural and architectural loss, opposite of what Charleston stands for and is known for. It's possible to keep College Lodge as an integral part of the campus, and it's certainly worthy.
Thank you, Professor LaBelle Tula. Other members of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carrie Campion. I live at 1 Rutledge Boulevard, and I'm a senior at the College of Charleston, studying preservation and business. I would like to thank the board for hearing public comments tonight. Aside from College Lodge's inherent architectural and historical value, I'm here to speak in support of preserving College Lodge for the following reasons. 1, protecting the precedent of Calhoun Street. If College Lodge were to be demolished, it would undoubtedly spur other demolition applications for buildings throughout Charleston's main streets. I distinctly remember College Lodge when I toured the College of Charleston. Whether someone considers this building attractive or not, it is undeniably memorable and contributes a level of uniqueness to the streetscape. 2, the configuration of College Lodge effectively serves as a dorm and allows for a social and dynamic living environment. I lived in McAllister Residence Hall on St. Philip Street, which was recently upfitted to fulfill growing student needs at the College of Charleston. McAllister utilizes a motor inn-like model over 6 stories, including a central courtyard and open-air hallways. I found this to be a wonderful place to live. The configuration of McAllister mimics that of College Lodge, and most likely wouldn't have been repeated if this mix of indoor and outdoor space was less desirable or harder to maintain than a more traditional dorm design. 3, preservation is always a more sustainable solution. Even when considering the amount of work College Lodge would require, the cost of full demolition and new construction would be greater than restoration. If you combine the material waste, energy use, pollution to air, water, and soil of new development, preserving the bones of College Lodge will decrease environmental harm to downtown overall. I would like to recognize the financial implications of restabilizing and restoring this building and thank the College of Charleston for prioritizing the experience and safety of future students. I believe that as a state institution with one of the most impressive inventories of historic structures, the College of Charleston has an obligation to continue stewarding all of its campus buildings. Using inspiration pulled from previous restoration-based designs like those of Satile and Satile, College Lodge can once again be a great place to live.
Thank you, Ms. Campion. Further members of the public wishing to speak on this agenda?
Hello, my name is Caroline Wilson. I am a Charleston resident and a practicing architectural historian, as well as the current president of Mid-Mod SC, which is our statewide organization tasked with the identification and preservation of buildings constructed during the modernist period. Will first off say that my organization was the sponsor of the online petition to save College Lodge. And I did not submit the full roster of signatures again. I did that at the first meeting in January, but to date, we have garnered 1,781 signatures in favor of keeping College Lodge. So I think that is a significant number. Work commitments actually kept me from attending the last meeting in person, but I was able to access the meeting virtually, which I appreciate the city for doing that. I hope to address some of the comments that were made during that meeting, specifically in regards to the validity of the South Carolina SHPO's determination of eligibility for College Lodge. I have over 15 years of experience in the identification and nomination of historic properties to the National Register of Historic Places. And I can attest to the SHPO's authority on these matters. Potentially, the SHPO is the gatekeeper of the National Register in our state, and they would not suggest a building is eligible unless they believe it can successfully pass our state board of review and the National Register reviewer in Washington, D.C. And let me tell you, she is difficult. And as a result of that, our SHPO staff has become extremely aware of the fact that, you know, there's additional scrutiny of National Register nominations. And so for them to actually still come out and say this building is eligible, that is significant. I should also like to say that I work exclusively with developers seeking to rehab historic properties using federal and state historic preservation tax credits. Property must be listed or eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places to use these programs. I frequently work with the SHPO to obtain eligibility determinations for these projects. And for my projects in South Carolina alone, these preliminary determinations have been used to underwrite over $100 million in rehabilitation costs. In short, the SHPO's opinion is very valid and should not be questioned. Secondly, the College of Charleston has provided a myriad of reasons for wanting to demolish College Lodge. But so far, I understand the upgrades that are required, but it's still just not compelling enough evidence to explain why they would want to demolish the building or would proceed with demolishing the building, I should say. They claim that it cannot be rehabilitated for student use, yet there are examples of the same type of building that have been successfully rehabilitated. One of those examples is literally just down the road in Savannah. Oglethorpe House was a former downtowner and was renovated by the Savannah College of Art and Design in 1990. And I see no reason why that cannot be used as a successful model for what College Lodge could be. It seems to me that the college has not even consulted these projects to see how they could successfully complete the renovation of College Lodge. Finally, I would just like to say, in President Sue's defense of the college's plan to demolish the building in the Post and Courier, he argued that the college is preservation minded because they own and care for over 90 registered listed buildings. That is a heavy responsibility, but the college should not receive a pass on the demolition because the campus is essentially a historic district in and of itself. In closing, the college has produced experts to paint a dire picture of the building, and they have completed this task. What we haven't heard are the opinions of experts with experience in the restoration of mid-century buildings, which do pose a different set of challenges, but they are not insurmountable. This is because, in my mind, the college has put little effort into the idea of actually rehabbing the building. And on a personal note, this is very upsetting for me because I am a graduate of the College of Charleston Historic Preservation Program. I think a rare unicorn in that I actually do what I went to school for. And I am grateful to the College of Charleston for that. But it is very upsetting to see my alma mater be so short-sighted wasteful of resources and disrespectful of historic architecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Further members of the public wishing to speak on this project.
Hello, my name is Tessie Robinson, and I'm speaking as an alumnus of the College of Charleston's Historic Preservation and Community Planning Program. Demolishing the structure would conflict in what I learned in my 4 years from the college's Historic Preservation Program. This is not the first time that a building has been on the College of Charleston, that the building has been on the chopping block. Despite the college's assurances of their preservation ethic, a former student from the class of 2022 uncovered that at least 115 historic structures have been demolished since 1888. The College of Charleston states that history isn't an anchor for the college, but instead a strong foundation. However, the proposed demolition of College Lodge, a building that represents an important period of history, suggests otherwise. I'm asking you, the board, to hold the College of Charleston accountable and to not allow another part of Charleston's history to be lost and forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public wishing to speak. Seeing none, city staff comments or recommendations?
A decision on this demolition request is not about personal architectural preferences or future use or building modifications beyond what is minimally required by code or cost, but whether the application meets the criteria for demolition. As noted, and I should say, I'm going to quote from the word for the public, I'm going to quote from the ordinance and then use some facts and also some things that were presented to us over the convening months to sort of illuminate that. As noted at the previous board meeting related to this application, the purpose of Charleston's historic districts are, quote, advanced through the preservation and protection of old historic or architecturally worthy structures and quaint neighborhoods which impart a distinct aspect to the city and which serve as visible reminders of the historical and cultural heritage of the city, the state, and the nation. The ordinance states that the BAR consider, among other things, the following criteria for reviewing demolition requests in the old and historic district: historic, architectural, and aesthetic features of the structure, nature and character of the surrounding area, historic or cultural importance of such structure, and importance to the city. In considering historic, architectural, and aesthetic features of the structure, it is noted that this is one of the few mid-century structures remaining in downtown Charleston. Aesthetically, it features horizontal lines, the downtowner breeze block, and cantilever exterior circulation, although this feature has been significantly altered with vertical supports and taller guardrails, which dilutes the purity of this feature. The paneled elevation, now adorned with a mural facing Calhoun, was indicative of the downtowner motor inn in modernist aesthetics. And based on applicant comments, I just want to add the definition of historic in this district is 50 years or older. So while in 2002, the board was considering the structure at its age at the time, currently this is now considered an historic structure, which it would not have been in 2002. In considering the nature and character of the surrounding area, it is noted the design of the downtown or compromised the public space experience by creating a closed ground floor experience that is more suburban and auto-oriented in nature, in contrast to the, quote, compact urban settlement that characterizes the historic development of this historic district. In considering the historic or cultural important use of such structure, Ms. Wilson, I'm going to quote from you from your previous comments. Mid-Mod SC President Caroline Wilson notes that the structure, quote, represents Charleston's early efforts to position itself as a tourist destination by providing modern facilities for travelers relying on their vehicles, end quote. For an even larger portion of its lifespan, the building's cultural significance has been tied to its life as a dormitory after being acquired by the College of Charleston in 1975. In considering the importance to the city, the South Carolina State Historic Preservation Office notes, quote, the Downtowner Motor Inn appears to be a rare surviving example in downtown Charleston of the type of automobile-oriented motel that became common across the country in the mid-20th century. Likewise, the property is also an unusual example of modernism in downtown Charleston. Modernism is not common in Charleston, and the Downtowner Motor Inn appears to be one of the few, if not only, examples of mid-century modern motel design remaining downtown, end quote. The SHPO's comments were provided as part of a letter wherein they officially determined College Lodge to be eligible for individual listing on the National Register of Historic Places following the submittal of a preliminary information form by the Preservation Society of Charleston. Approval of a PIF, and I know form sounds banal, but by the SHPO, as has been previously commented on, is not easily achieved and should be treated with significance as it demonstrates the structure is a historic resource of merit. Mid-Mod SC has stated to staff that they are pursuing the National Register nomination with submittal to the SHPO likely by the end of April. Also related to importance to the city, it is noted that stakeholders as interviewed in the 2020 Sotil and Sotil report provided by the applicant and via public comment at the previous meeting on 10 January 2024 demonstrate a broad consensus against full demolition of College Lodge. The applicant has made a compelling case about how much historic fabric and defining architectural characteristics of the building will be destroyed if either the retrofit or restoration options are pursued based on seismic upgrades. However, both the applicant's engineering consultant and the South Carolina Deputy State Engineer note that the seismic upgrades are voluntary and not required because the use is not changing. The desire to update the structures and systems in this building is understandable, not just at this building, but for all historic buildings that the applicant owns. Nevertheless, the voluntary upgrades do not fall under the criteria for consideration of demolition. And I also want to make an aside here because there's been a lot of semantics, and I really appreciate Mr. Gilbert because he was very clear. For code, they are voluntary and not required. However, the applicant, based on a lot of very important expertise, considers them necessary. And we do not.
Sorry, it depends on which, I'm sorry.
Clarification on that?
Yeah, I'm trying to compliment Mr. Wilson. Mr. Gilbert, so, yeah, I know.
I just want to be clear, it's dependent on which corrective action is done, retrofit or reconstruction. The reconstruction does trigger code mandated upgrades.
Yes, but for demolition,
I just
this
want
is
to be clear
not,
on
this is not where considered, and I'm just trying to make the point about voluntary, because required has been used in a not precise way during some of this. Necessary or necessity was the correct term because the college views it as necessary as opposed to required on some of these issues. So I just want to make sure that that is understood, that they are voluntary.
And I would like to dispute that when.
Yes. Okay. Should we get, because I'm getting close.
Yeah, let's
I'm
get through,
supposed to
let's get
finish
through
my
these
comments,
comments.
and the applicant is
Yes,
given time
yes,
to comment,
yes,
so we'd like to do it that
Let's
way.
get through her comments and then we'll address that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, or was I? The applicant has engaged in studying the problem of how to put College Lodge back into productive use from 2020 until now, and these efforts are appreciated. The ordinance states that, quote, "The Board of Architectural Review may refuse a permit for demolition of any structure within the Old and Historic District, which in the opinion of the Board of Architectural Review would be detrimental to the interests of the Old and Historic District and against the historic character and public interest of the city." The Sotil and Sotil report from 2020, including the interview with the previous city architect Dennis Dowd, in which, quote, "Mr. Dowd stated that the city is not going to support the demolition of College Lodge, noting a reluctance to support demolition of mid-century buildings and the desire to protect buildings more than 50 years of age. Current staff concurs with this assessment and staff recommendations for denial."
Okay, thank you. The applicant has 5 minutes to respond to any or all of that.
Okay. I've got a couple of things to say. I'll try and be brief. There are two buildings in Charleston that I'm aware of and acquainted with that are modern buildings, 61 Van Charleston, 960 Morrison, the old Johnson & Johnson building. I was the architect for both of those buildings. So I don't think it's fair to say that I do not have not studied modern architecture buildings. Those buildings, 960 Morrison has 12-foot floor to floors. It's got open web trusses. It has got a central core where everything can travel down from the roof. That is workable. 61 Van Charleston has a 9-foot, 4-inch floor to floors. It has open web trusses. You can weave things between them. That was barely workable. We had these crazy soffits that just can't believe that people pay what they do to live in there. However, 8'4", not 8'11", which is listed in the Satile report and also in the 2002 report, drawings that the college had done, is what you've got. So when it was built, it was 7 inches floor to floor shorter than the drawings indicated. So this is a different building, and is being different is what is its problem, unfortunately. It is the engineer described it as a house of cards on popsicle sticks. All the other, masonry buildings, the two that I just mentioned, they go to the ground, the walls go to the ground. This one is a heavy building sitting on columns, pilotis, whatever you want to call them. And as the building shakes, they fail. That is why this building is so different. It's unique. And that's the problem. That is unfortunately the problem with trying to make it work. Buildings in California were mentioned. In the 1960s, they had the UBC code. That was more strict than the Southern code that SBC that we had here. Even the seismic back then, seismic upgrades are slightly easier on these types of buildings, especially if there's an institution that's built this building. That was one of the samples that was brought up. They are not developers who are looking to get the quick return on the dollar from cheap hotels. Again, it is unique. It is a cool building, but these are the things that cause the problems that we have today. Tax credits are non-starter for the college, the state institution. That worked great for the hotel, the short-term stay up in Charleston. The rehabilitated Oglethorpe building in Savannah is in a green seismic zone on the map instead of a bright red one. Where we are, we're in seismic zone D. Same with the other downtowner that's in Cheyenne. So let's see. There was one or two other quick things I wanted to say. One of the items in the code, we can talk about seismic. I do need to read something into the record from the Office of the State Engineer. But if I go to the existing building code, you'll have all used it, chapter 12. One of the things that it talks about is unsafe conditions that must be corrected. That's why the egress balconies were the first things that the engineer studied. How do we keep people safe when they're trying to get out of this building? Well, columns and beams does that. When I listened to the engineer describe the building as corkscrewing into the ground, to me that's an unsafe condition. You've got students in there. So that part of the code moves you towards seismic from my point of view as an architect. There's only limited things I'm willing to stamp, and that wouldn't be one of them. So that's the chapter 12. I'm going to read into the record this email from the Office of the State Engineer, because we're having this clarification issue about seismic. So I apologize, I didn't mean to interrupt earlier. But it says, this is from Christy Schultz to Gerald, the authority having jurisdiction. So with Charleston, we've got reviewers, the college has to go through the state. Bill, we will be going to the BAR tonight to request demo of the college lodge. The city architect has notified us that she has recommended denial on the grounds that seismic is voluntary and not required by code. And therefore CFC should continue to occupy as is. My question to you as a structural engineer is whether you are comfortable with students reoccupying a dorm that CFC structural engineer ADC has deemed structurally unsafe as is. I've attached the report, ADC reports, 2021 and the updated 2024 report submitted to the BAR. Please let me know if you need further information. The response from Phil Gerald, PE, CPM, CBO, Deputy State Engineer, the Office of State Engineer's Office, in the Division of Procurement Service says, Christie, I would agree with ADC. I would not be comfortable placing students in a facility that may not be able to withstand the seismic event. From what the college can speak to this more, but from what I understand, the college hires their professionals, they work with the OSE, they come up with a requirement at the end of it. Is that accurate? So I appreciate you all working with us, and I just wanted to make that point of clarification. Is there anything else that the college would like to add? That's this, yeah. Chris.
I would like Chris to speak to your feelings about lodge specifically within Charleston.
But Christy, it's really important. You have to be
Go
at
to-
the, it's really important. Okay.
I would like Chris Gilder, our structural engineer, to speak specifically to his feelings about College Lodge. I think one of the things that really struck me was when he said to me, Christy, there's two buildings that worry me on the peninsula of Charleston, and College Lodge is one of them. So I will let you expand on that, and I'd also like for him to mention if he hears that a friend of his child will be living in College Lodge, what he recommends.
Chris Gover with ADC again. Just a couple of things, brought up the Satil and Satil report. One of the things with that was a conceptual plan. No engineer looked at that. That plan, if it were implemented, would require total seismic upfit with the walls that are being removed, the penetrations that are being provided. That concept would trigger seismic upgrades. With respect to other dorms that the college has, the biggest difference between dorms that the college has in this building is load path. I'm old school, College of Charleston, 1990, so I'm gonna say Wentworth dorm. It's McConnell Hall now, but I go back to Wentworth dorm. Everything in that dorm stacks. The College Lodge doesn't have that. It has a huge mass on top of essentially flagpoles, and it just wants to shake, it wants to twist in a seismic event. The unfortunate thing is, due to its simplicity in nature, it makes it very difficult to retrofit it and retrofit it in a way that stays with the core. Anything we do to retrofit that building is going to deter from it. My son is graduating Wando High School. He's been out looking at colleges, and we've toured many dorms, we've toured many colleges. And I went back and asked myself, would I want my son staying here? No, I wouldn't. To me, it is not, it's not a safe building for the public. I would, again, going back, it's a unique building. It is different. It's unlike anything else in Charleston, yes. But Charleston is also unique in nature too, in the sense that we are high seismic, we are poor soils, we are high winds. Comparing down to Savannah, the Oglethorpe house, that is a completely different seismic zone. It has a quarter of the seismic force that we look at. It's a seismic design category C. It doesn't have the detailing requirements that we do. It's more of an apples and oranges comparison than an apples to apples comparison, structurally speaking. So I just wanted to bring those points back. Thank you.
I will add a quick comment to the Oglethorpe house in Savannah. Actually, we did study that extensively, and it was one of the leading reasons that when we did the Satil report, we elected to do the adaptive reuse. We went and toured that building, thought, wow, this is really doable. But as Chris stated, we did not really go much beyond that surface. We did not do any structural studies with the Satil report. Nobody really thought about seismic. It just was very superficial. It was really when we started digging or getting into the reality of rehabbing this building that all these things came up.
Thank you. Okay, board discussion and a potential vote on this agenda item. Board members' questions of the applicants. I'll start off as the non-architect on here by saying I think it's important for the purposes of our discussion that we separate the germane from the not germane. But I would also say this about the application that is before us, which is that it is apparent that Simmons Young and the folks at the College of Charleston did in fact look at this project as a rehab project. They spent several $1 million getting into it. And it's clear that when they did slab cut, something I know from the litigation work that I do, that they discovered that they had a lot of problems. And that's not unlike a surgery. When a surgeon goes in and finds something wrong, you don't know how bad it really is until you get in there. And that's self-evident is what happened with this process. So what I would say in considering the demolition is we should consider the rather extensive efforts that were made by the parties involved with the college before they concluded they had not some intractable problems, but some serious problems. As Mr. Young has said, especially in consideration of his working on other mid-century modern buildings, it's not impossible to do. It presents a lot of issues. So retreating to what is before us is whether this building has enough historic significance to preserve its own right. It's certainly of an age that we can consider that it should not be demolished. We need to consider the context, its significance in the neighborhood, important events that happen there, et cetera. And so I guess I would lead off on those comments by saying that the downtown was part of a chain. It looks much like its contemporaries, as we saw from the college's previous show. I take in terms of the context of the neighborhood. Well, that neighborhood has seen a lot of demolition over the years in the Calhoun Street corridor, not 100 yards away, the Charleston Orphan House. And so it is a choppy neighborhood. I don't know that I could give you a single identifying architectural characteristic for that neighborhood until you wrap your way around to King Street or until you get much farther down to the east on Calhoun, or west on Calhoun for that matter. I take very serious consideration of Mr. Young's statement that I don't know if anybody remembers this, College of Charleston grads would, with a strong focus on classics. There's a kind of ship of Theseus problem with this building. The ship of Theseus story was that when Theseus went and slain the Minotaur and it came back, they saved the ship that he did it on, but the ancient equivalent of Yorktown. And of course, because it was a wooden ship over several hundred years, they had to rebuild pieces and layers of it. And the philosophical question that comes out of that is, at what point does the building cease to be College Lodge and a replica of College Lodge? And there's also been a longstanding precedent of this board that we don't allow replicas in some cases, which I strongly disagree with, or allow perfect recreation developments that were destroyed over time. This board has traditionally disfavored that, even though I've disputed that at times. So I think that the college has made a compelling case that it did in fact get into this project with the full intention of doing rehabilitation. Realized, just as often happens with these projects, that the architects had done a good job of what they thought the rehab was going to be. But when you start doing cuttings and you start dealing with very practical issues like chases and ducts, you have some serious constrictions in the building. At some point, you're reconstructing the building as opposed to preserving it. And then falling back to our criteria, I just can't identify. Yes, if there's one criteria for which one would weigh in favor of saving it, it would be it's a mid-century modern building. There is a lot of context that goes with that, but an important part of that context, it was built at a time when Charleston was in economic depression. People motored into this motor court and then motored out. It's inherently a building that is not pedestrian friendly or friendly to neighborhoods. It's friendly to getting your automobile in and out and then back on the interstate or the highway. So I think that those are important considerations. Further discussion from board members.
You further? As everybody I think knows, and for better or worse, I sat at the first hearing, and saw it, and to be honest, I've always been a fan of the building. I think it's fantastic. I do think some of the, and I really appreciate the thoughtful support of the public and those that have spoken in favor of it. And came to this with open eyes, as I did last time during our 2 site visits and all of those things. I do think in reviewing, and it's been mentioned before, but I think it's very important to do so for the record, that the Satil report, even before it was said tonight, you can see it was a very cursory, broad brush, conceptual type item. There was no mechanical, no structural, no engineers, nothing. And even as I read it, to their credit, they mentioned retain the overall aesthetic character, but fully modernize all systems, bring the systems up to modern codes and standards, completely refurbish, bring the facility up to current building and life safety accessibility codes. Those were all the recommendations. It didn't go any further than that. And there were beautiful drawings, beautiful pictures, but it didn't address any of that, or the implications of that. And as far as our charge as the board, which I take very seriously, which makes it all the more difficult. The thing that I struggle with is the historical and architectural and aesthetic features of the structure, which based on everything that would be required code-wise, in my opinion, would change significantly. The proportions of the windows, the fenestration and in addressing those that kind of support the demo, I do think it's important to say that, and these were notes I made as we were doing, they think it's unsightly, not typical Charleston character. It's too expensive. It won't accommodate the students. Cost too much. Won't accommodate the students. Cost too much. And sorry to sound callous, but too bad. I mean, if that's what it is, that has no bearing on any decision we would make. Those not supporting the demo note that it's a building of its time and marks that period. It's unique, mid-century modern, important cultural reference. And the irony is I agree with all of that. But what my huge concern is, and is the architectural result of what would happen when all of the life safety requirements are implemented. And they significantly alter the proportions, the details, the materials, everything from the support systems to the fenestration. And I just made a list of things. I was like, are the egress and fire protection systems code compliant? No. And that wasn't addressed except cursory in the Satil report. And what are the architectural implications if we're just addressing the architecture of the building and making them so? Are the structural systems code compliant? No. What are the implications of doing that? The fenestration, the mechanical system, the stormwater management, all of the things that would be required to be done to this building. I mean, sadly, I think destroy it, and that's the problem. Now, is it something that it gets taken down and somebody rebuilds a reproduction? You could do that. But again, is that genuine? I don't know. I don't think so. And the level to which it would have to be cut back, I think, again, very respectfully to all of those in support of it, it's not insignificant. And some of the examples that were cited, and I know that's been mentioned too in Savannah, which is a fantastic building, but doesn't have the same issues we have here with Charleston. California, similarly, but they've already started addressing those well before we did. And from what we have understood from submission materials and otherwise, when I think there was an effort to start implementing some of these mechanical systems, the random placement of steel and rebar and whatnot in the slabs, which are incredibly thin. There's no telling where they all sit, what happens, what's get cut if you penetrate something through it. In addition to the fact that you're pulling it in well within the walls, or they are presently. And so much of the time, I think, again, we're charged with what's left of this building when you do everything you need to do that's authentic. And I also think that's often a case, and anytime we've dealt with SHPO, and again, appreciate the comments of those that spoke in reference to them, because have a lot of respect for them and we deal with them often. But it's the merit of it is as it is now, and I don't know if it's there when everything's done, be it beams or thicker slabs or new rails and all the new materials and everything. If that's not able to be retained, is that still the same structure? So it's not an easy one, and I was trying to come up with an excuse to not be here tonight, and so I went back. And just that wasn't unfair. It wasn't fair to anybody. So I'm probably, yeah, I just, I would very, very difficultly and reluctantly select the demo because I think the product that would result from everything that is, have to be done to this building, and I do not, sorry, I'm gonna say that any of that seismic stuff in any way, shape, or form should be optional, regardless. Nobody wants to be in a building, particularly in our locale. And does that trigger things in other buildings? Perhaps, but not to the level of this one, because as we said, the irony of the whole thing is it's unique. I mean, it's slab upon columns. There aren't a lot of buildings like that. So it's almost an argument for keeping it, but it's also the argument for why you can't, because and that wouldn't necessarily apply to some of these other structures that aren't being brought up to seismic, but at least their load paths structurally are similar or line up on each other. They've got substantial wall systems, lateral support. They're not 6 levels tall on spindly columns, all of which would change significantly with what would be required. And I just think it's almost a drawing of looking at what it would be after all was said and done. You know, beyond conceptual, which was very helpful tonight, would just be very different. So I again, very difficultly and reluctantly would support demo.
Ms. Sojak?
Right, yeah, I wanted to escape as well, but. It is very, very difficult dilemma. From many points, and being architect, even worse for me. But what we have to consider as a board or individual members, it's almost kind of spelled out in staff comments and analysis. Nevertheless, you know, over the years, like buildings of 60s were frowned on, and we lost a lot of them, a lot because of that. And now we finally stop and say, oh God, what we are doing. So again, in Charleston, this is one of the, I guess, last what is left and very visible on Calhoun Street and all that. So there's 2 terms were constantly brought up, preservation and reconstruction. And reconstruction, will it be genuine? Very far-fetched comment. Notre Dame in Paris is actually reconstruction, but also preservation. So how we can look at that? And in this case, and can we consider reconstruction? There's only reconsider reconstruction, but you know, matching as much as we can with all the engineering which we need to provide for this building. And yes, seismic is scary. And I guess Charleston is a beautiful one. So can we look at that and still have this building? There's, we're saying 12 feet from the exterior, so we still have a core. Still can work with that. So it's not total reconstruction. So again, reconstruction plus preservation. That's kind of my point. But
Further comments or a motion to make a vote?
Well, Luda makes an excellent point. I mean, I hadn't thought of it that perspective, but I guess I say I'm still tilting a little bit more, no pun intended, to the demo. I just have a
problem with the level to which we would be reconstructing, but let's get it over with. I'll move for demolition.
There's a motion to approve demolition of College Lodge. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. It's in proper order. Ms. Sobchak, how do you vote?
Nay.
Mr. Fagan?
Aye.
And myself in favor of approval of the demolition. Thank you.
Agenda item number 3. 143 Calhoun Street.
Yeah, we can. Oh, I did. Did she leave?
But she was sitting right there. She walked out and I haven't seen her come back.
Okay.
So we
Well,
can either, revert
or-
on to the next one.
Yeah, can I,
They can also be- Actually, it's not in rooms, we like going there just. We'll let everybody. Well, it's just wait and see what John wants to do.
could I entertain a motion from my fellow board members?
Oh, wait, she's right there in the door. She's
Never mind.
right there in the door.
Yeah, she just,
Okay.
okay.
I was
Yeah,
gonna-
she's coming.
I was gonna
She
move the
she's
agenda.
still not here, but.
You're up.
Switch order. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we still have to do the official preamble, but yeah.
Agenda item number 3, 143 Calhoun Street.
143 Calhoun Street is a Category 3 building dating from 1907 in the Old and Historic District. Applicant requests conceptual approval for renovations to restore a building envelope, create an accessible entrance, reopen some existing windows, and renovate the interior for tenant use. Here's the existing context of the building. And then what you'll see is some existing site photos and context from the street level. We are ready for applicant presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ashley Jennings. I'm an architect and I've been doing this for 25 years since we're telling everybody how many years. I've been working in the historic district now for 20 years. Y'all have seen this project. This is the third time it's coming to you, the second time in this form and this iteration. The proposal is to renovate the Knights of Columbus building, but with my clients, the representatives from Columbus Building Company, to be able to use the building again. And so our first iteration was to request to remove the grand stair in the front to create an accessible entrance, which was denied by the board, and so, or deferred, I believe, by the board. And so we came to you with a second proposal, which was to move the entrance to the side of the building. And that's what we're here tonight to present. And a little bit of a change to the front doors. You can see here, this is the building as it exists today. These are the entry steps. This is the entry door that's in question. The steps are not in question today. And Sanborn maps. And these are the historic pictures of the building. And as you can see, this image up here is the building when it was dedicated. And so one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit about today is this opening right here. When we talk about the new proposal. This is the existing site plan showing the building as it sits on the site. And our proposal, as you recall from the previous application, is to bring anybody that needs to get into the building and maintain accessibility around to the side of the building. And so here you see the proposal. It's to create a lobby with an elevator. You're coming in at grade or close to grade of the sidewalk. You go half a stop down to access the first floor use in the elevator, or in the stairwell, half a stop up to go to the main level, and then another stop to go to the top level. These are floor plans. This is just the basement level plan. You can see the bottom. And this is the sidewalk level plan. This is the first floor level plan, with the proposal to use the space possibly as an event space, possibly as another tenant space. And then the top floor plan, which has traditionally been used as a ballroom, to be reused as a ballroom. And this is a roof plan showing just some things that are necessary as part of this renovation. We're proposing to remove the existing rear stair that's not code compliant anymore and install a new rear stair. Also, you'll see that there are mechanical units that will be located on the roof. And in addition to this, we're proposing general renovations to the building, the envelopes in bad shape, repointing the masonry, restoring windows and reopening some of the windows. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So here you can see the 3 iterations of the project. This is the existing Calhoun streetscape as the building sits now. This was the previous proposal where we opened this, maintained the stairs, but opened this element up in the side, in the center of that wall. And this is the current proposed elevation here. And you can see the current, once again, current and proposed. So, and we are proposing to open the windows on the top floor where the windows have not been bricked in, but that have been enclosed with plywood. And there'll be some other renovations to the building, restoring the terracotta cap, repointing the building, recoating the roof, maybe re-roofing the remaining part of the low slope roof. And then as we move around the building, you can see that there's some work to the back of the building, including a new stair. We cleaned things up a little bit. You can see the corral for the mechanical units on the roof. This is the west elevation, and you can see here the proposal to open this area up and create a triple door here that allows for a larger entrance here. And this is actually in the place where there were some modifications previously. In our last application, we had a triple window here. We reduced that to a single window. And this is an image of the building as it would look from the street. And this is it as an individual building without the streetscape. So a lot of the conjecture happened last time over this opening here and what was happening at the top of the stair. And I'm going to back up a little bit just to talk about that. So one of the challenges with this building is the stairs go right up to the door. There's no landing at the top of the stairs. So the door opens at the top step. And so the intent here is to make this a more functional entrance. And the discussion happened last time is that we widened this opening to create a recess back here in order to allow a landing to happen. And there was a lot of discussion about that. And at the end, the board decided that they did not want us to modify this original masonry opening. So what you see tonight is the original masonry opening. The wall steps back. So you pass through the original masonry opening to this landing element here. And then the door sits behind it. The door, yes, the door to the building is not original now. If we want to back up a little bit. This is the door that's here now. And you can see the light above it is very large. This is the original door. But some other things to note in this work that we're doing. We're proposing to, right now there's some curved planters that are happening here. At one point, there were some steps that went down to the lower area, and they modified this wall system at some point and lost these 2 openings. And the proposal is to also reconstruct these little pieces here and to reopen these openings on the face of the building. And you can see that here. So once again, what you're seeing, this door is actually behind this plane, behind the brick facade. And there's an element that's in the crust that's in the original storefront, or not the original storefront, but the current storefront is to go back. And I think that's all I need to say, right? Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, very quickly, actually, is the original doors just higher, right? Taller than what we have now?
The original doors were taller than what we have now.
So
yes.
you matching original?
No, actually, we are showing the doors lower. The transom bar is about at the same height as the doors that are currently there now. In the glass storefront that's back behind that opening. But we're open to suggestions on that one.
Very good. Any member of the public wish to comment on this agenda item? Ms. Behar.
Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society wants to express our appreciation to the applicant for restudying this proposal through a preservation lens and appropriately responding to previous board feedback. The current design is a sensitive, reasonable solution to rehabilitating the building that makes positive improvements for accessibility while retaining its historic character. We look forward to seeing use of the building restored and are pleased to lend our support for conceptual approval.
Thank you, Ms. Behar. Any other member of the public wishing to be heard on this item? Seeing none. City staff comments or recommendations?
Sure. As previously noted at the board meeting on 28th February, staff supports the following. One, on the roof, the new aluminum mechanical screen is minimally visible from the right of way. Two, on the east facade, all the new wood windows proposed for existing closed window openings and all repair and restoration detail work. In the west facade, the design of the new set of doors and associated awning to facilitate the introduction of the new ADA entrance, the opening of the previously closed windows, and all repair and restoration detail work. On the south facade, the new steel exit stairs and all repair and restoration detail work. On the north facade, the return of the water table windows with jack arch headers, which historic photos show as an original characteristic of the main facade. If windows remain the same proportion and location as the historic windows, and all repair and restoration detail work. Additionally, the applicant has removed the triple set of windows on the west facade above the new ADA door as requested by staff and board. Finally, the applicant has restudied the entrance on the north facade as requested by the board. Staff supports the restudy, which keeps the historic brick wall intact, removes the existing door and transom, salvages and reuses the crest in the new transom, and sets the new glazed door back in order to provide a safer landing space at the top of the stairs. Staff conditions for approval continue that the stair railing ends right at the wall, but doesn't actually turn. So if you came through that portal, I'm imagining my mom, she has nothing to grab onto. So we would like to see that turn the corner. Staff recommendation is conceptual approval with board and staff comments.
Thank you, PD. Any response, Ashley?
No.
Okay, good. Wise. Okay, board discussion and a vote.
I'll just quickly say that I agree with the Preservation Society's comments and with staff's recommendation.
I would ditto that.
Just one second that.
Yeah, and I do want to express actually to you and your applicants, in case they think they got run through a ringer a little bit, but you found a great solution that works and that respects the historic integrity of what we considered. So please relay that earnestly to your client. You did a great job finding a great solution to a lot of hard limitations.
Mr. Chairman, Eddie, you have anything to say? Thank you, Ash. Yeah, it's great. It's a great final product. I would move for approval with board and staff comments, and if there's no objection, I'd be okay with final details and approvals to the staff.
Okay, for permit drawing.
Permit drawings.
Excellent. Very good.
If the staff is okay with that.
Yes, we're okay with that.
Okay, very good.
I'll second that.
The motion is now in proper order. Any further comments? Hearing none, Mr. Fava, how do you vote?
I in favor.
Mr. Metters, Ms. Sobchak, Mr. White, and myself in favor. Thank you to the applicant.
Thank you.
Our final item of the evening is 131 Columbus Street. New construction in the Old and Historic District, and the request is for conceptual review of a new hotel. Here's the aerial of the site. And then you'll see the existing site photos as well as context. And we're ready for applicant's presentation.
Oh, sure. My name is David Urban. I'm a GRC architect. Thank you for the opportunity to provide our responses to you from your comments based on our presentation we made last month, our concept design presentation. I have the clicker here. Your comments were insightful and precise. And they involve very specific parts of the building. So if it's all right with you, we can skip to those specific parts of the building. It starts really at the floor plans, though. We've modified each of the floor plans. I'll go to the rooms floor because it probably best exhibits how we modified the floor plan to respond to the comments. So here's typical room floor. This is the previous plan. These are subtle responses, but we think they're very effective. So here's the top plan is the previous guest room floors 3 through 7 effectively. So here on the Columbus Street side, you can see we're flush here basically along the property line, and likewise on Spring Street flush to the property line. This prevented us from having any unprotected openings on that western facade, which was a big part of our discussion at our last gathering, if you recall. So what we've been able to do is move that facade. If you look at the lower drawing, the updated floor plans, and this is true on all levels of the building, we're moving the floor plan in. We're creating a setback on Columbus and on Spring Street greater than 3 feet, which allows us a limited amount, but effective amount of unprotected opening. So we'll return to this in a second. This is just where these occurred in the presentation. We're going to move forward to the general elevation on the low line facade. We appreciate there was a lot of conversation about scale, height, and mass, where you guys showed a great deal of appreciation for what we've done in the general concepting of the architecture for the building, including the arched base and the masonry frame that creates most of the structure between levels 2 through 7. The way the 8th floor is set back from the general facade to reduce the scale and mass of the building. But there was some discussion, and it wasn't trite, about the amount of movement in the glazing that you see within that rigid or formal masonry frame. So and we took that to heart and we looked at it, and there was a lot of good discussion in this room about that as well. We felt that at the end of the day, and it was definitely addressed in the comments, that there should be additional movement to reflect a more intentional amount of movement in that glass. So this is going to be a subtle change from what we showed you previously in our last meeting to here. What we have done is we have studied the masonry panels and the way they flow along the facade, as well as watching just the glass and how it is modulated along the within the masonry frame. So it's a subtle amount of additional movement by moving some of the windows even further out of alignment from let's say the windows above or below, but it creates a little bit more definition. It certainly reflects our design concept more intentionally. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the previous slide. This is what we showed you previously, where certain things aligned a little bit more, say, for example, here or here, which changes as we move. We've made adjustments there to create more visual interest, to reflect more flow in the building, which, as you recall, very much aligns with the building concept of the site being one representative of the historic flow of the train moving through the site and the future flow as this becomes a civic amenity with bike riders and pedestrians flowing through this site. So that's how we addressed one or two of the comments made from our previous meeting. There's not a lot of change in that view as you look from perspective view. The Columbus Street facade was adjusted a little bit due to the setback that we talked about at the floor plan level. So this is the existing drawing that we showed you last, the previous drawing that we showed you last month. And you'll see there's a subtle change as we have moved the building in greater than 3 feet to accommodate a setback on our western facade against our interior property line, which you'll see more in the next drawing. But I'll just go ahead and show you this again. This is the previous drawing, and this is the adjustment. So it's subtle. We think we preserved all the integrity of this Columbus Street facade, which was discussed and appreciated in our previous meeting. So let's go to the western facade, because I believe this was really the heart of your all's comments. It stimulated a lot of good conversation, and we think your comments were valid and certainly merited our response, and we'll show you that now. So as you recall, this western facade, which is flush in this image that we showed you last month, has all of the architectural detail, all the architectural materials that all the other three facades have. All the proportion is all the same, but it lacked windows, mainly because this facade was on an interior lot line on it and really couldn't legally through code have windows. So we made that adjustment, that setback. Now we've changed this view a little bit just to give you a fuller understanding of what we have done, which is we have, by setting this facade back here and as well on Spring Street, that greater than 3 foot dimension, we're able to incorporate, to get a little technical, 15% of any floor area, we can now make an unprotected opening, which we have done, and that is represented here on the guest room floors. At the elevator and stair vertical core, where we can't or don't need windows and really can't benefit from windows other than say fake false windows, we've added the detail of the metal panel in the same configuration of the windows. And the metal panel is consistent with what you see, the bronze anodized aluminum that you see throughout the project, whether we're talking about in the window detailing or the cornices, or now the penthouse, which was another comment that was made during our last meeting. We have modified the materiality and the proportions of the overruns of the elevators on both the Columbus side and the Spring Street side to be more consistent with the building. There were some comments about the verticality that we had. I will be able to show you that. Well, I'll go ahead and move to the next slide, because you can see the verticality in that penthouse here. And there were some comments that it didn't seem consistent with the architecture, and in fact made the building appear taller, which I think was a very legitimate concern. So we have, I'll go back to what we were just talking about. So we've modified the proportions and the reveals and added a cornice to those penthouse elements in order to address those comments. So let's go back to where we were from the King Street view. We showed you this view last month, and here is how that is reflected now with our responses. So again, there's the same amount of detail that we were showing you before. The setback actually adds a little bit of interest and detail too, which was maybe a surprise to us, but we're actually fairly pleased with how that worked out. So we've added that level of interest of having a change of plane here where previously it was flat. And now we of course added the windows in the same patterns as you see on all facades, as well as the addition of the aluminum panels in the elevator and stair area. So now we'll swing around to the same type of perspective that we showed you this time from Spring Street. This was what we showed you last month. And this is where we are today. Certainly a great deal more visual interest. And in some respects, the guest rooms probably conceivably have an improved experience by having those windows. Hopefully they don't get taken away by a construction project down the road, but be that as it may, this is, we think, a very solid solution based on your.
We'll make them have windows too.
So really, that's the extent. The rest of these images all remain the same. We did revise our formal elevations in the same manner with the previous and the updated versions, Spring Street, but really the commentary was directed more at the western facade. And so here you see that in previous and proposed now. So that really is our presentation. Again, appreciate the time this evening and
Any questions?
Your quick study getting to what has changed is always a good use of time. So that's very good application.
You talking about not letting Eddie talk?
Well, that may have helped too.
I'm sure you know.
He was talking about singing a little song. You want to hear?
I've heard that.
Is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard on this agenda item? Seeing none, city staff comments or recommendations.
In previous board meeting on 27 March, application was deferred for restudy of the west elevation. Staff and board were supportive of height, scale, and mass, and architectural direction on all other facades. Staff supports the subtle refinements to the fenestration patterns on the primary facades and the resulting compositional rhythm. The restudy of the west facade has alleviated the large amount of blank facade. Continued refinement of composition, material, and color choices can happen at the preliminary phase. Staff conditions for approval, continue to study and refine color of metal panels. For us, David, it was a very dark contrast, but I also recognize it's a render, right? But right now, the contrast between the metal panels and the brick feels a little too much for us. But again, color refinements can be discussed at preliminary. Maybe I'm saying these things in this direction. Staff recommendation is for conceptual approval with board and staff conditions.
Very good. Thank you. Any response from the applicant?
No.
Thank you. All right.
There aren't any comments, I'd make a motion.
Well, I would just like to, I want to give a compliment to the architect. I'm a symmetry guy. It's really hard to get me off symmetry. I appreciate the thoughtful response with the asymmetrical windows. It is actually interesting. And I think it actually most benefits that western facade, where you got a lot of space where you need some visual interest. So that comment being said, Mr.
Yeah.
Metters, oh, I'm sorry.
Very quickly.
Yes, of course.
So all this movement but refined is actually got away from the static facade to the dynamic, what you were looking for, but with the kind of more, how to say, more plausible. And getting rid of the masonry, heavy facades, and having these windows, which is in the rhythm with rest of the facade, the windows in this facade. But, you know, these corners, regardless, I think what will be built in front of it, they still will be visible from every street you're driving for. So doesn't matter if it will make somebody.
I probably won't be here, but.
Yeah, me too. But anyway, it's, thank you.
Okay, so that my motion from the
Thank you also. Motion for conceptual approval with board and staff comment.
The motion is for conceptual approval with board and staff comments. Is there conditions, excuse me, is there a second?
I will second.
Ms. Sobchak, it's in proper order. Mr. Fava, how do you vote? Mr. Metters, Ms. Sobchak, Mr. White, and myself, any favor? Thank you to the applicant.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. And our business is concluded and we are adjourned. Thank you. You did a great job.
No, thank you.